Hi everyone, this is Kyle with kayDbait. I wanted to make a video on something. It's going to be shorter than the other ones, hopefully. It's still a complex issue. It's going to be on tolerance and what that actually means, and why it should be implemented in the first place. There's a couple of different misconceptions about what tolerance is, especially when you're talking to somebody about something that's controversial. Um, let's give an example. When you have something, anything that one person doesn't like and another person is either a part of or is associated with something, whether it be nationality, political ideals, just anything. When one person doesn't like that, when they disagree with the ideals or what they stand for or who they are or what they are or anything, it could be actions, it could be status, it could be literally anything. When you have somebody that just doesn't like that, where where does the argument for tolerance come from? Why does one person or one group be proponents of tolerance for another group or their own group? What justifies that argument? Because there is an argument there. There is persecution that needs to be addressed for many groups, and there's also the opposite of that, when one person claims they should be tolerated when they actually shouldn't. So that's the issue people have with trust that they don't really understand fully, is that not everyone that claims that they should be tolerated should be, and then because equality is inherently right for people to be considered equal as a basis, but there's always going to be somebody that abuses a equal rights kind of law or cultural thing. They're going to abuse that for their own negative actions, whether it be financial or just getting power over something. There's an obvious laws, like the laws are not equal for men and women, for example. There are things that are different, like in custody battles. That's more of a cultural thing than an actual law thing in the United States. I mean, there are some, but the mother of a child and the father of a child, the mother is much more likely to get the child in the case of a divorce or a dispute or anything like that. That's just how the system is set up culturally, and that's the way people enforce it culturally. So there are discrepancies in these laws and in these the way that they're enforced that should be addressed much more thoroughly. But that's just one example. There's a lot of those ones really won't affect as many people that are really political or really into certain things, because that one's just kind of socially accepted, and it doesn't really get as much outrage. And that doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's good, but it means it's much harder to start the conversation. But it's also less likely to start a riot as well. So it's quieter. It's softer, kind of, when you try to talk about it, because there's people who are like, yeah, yeah, yeah. They're not going to start screaming about it unless they've been in a situation where that has happened. But for other things, like, and again, I don't use public outrage as a valuing or devaluing of what is important. It's so much harder to start a conversation about something that people don't care about. So, and it's harder to relate to as well. So I'll talk about something more prevalent. It was just earlier today. I was reading an article. I'm trying to remember what it was about exactly. It was about, oh, that's what it was. It was on the front page of Yahoo. It was I believe it said the Bible is not the no, for people outraged by gay marriage being legalized. And it was a biblical argument that the person in the article was making. It's like, don't be offended by the biblical connotations of sin and abomination. So I read the article, and it was fairly one-sided. It was fairly liberal, in that it was saying, because this are all sins in the Bible, and people do those things, then you shouldn't be against gay marriage. So he was pretty much calling everybody a hypocrite. Now, some of it was true, some of it was, just kind of, it was unnecessary to say because it really wasn't relevant. It was pretty much, it was accusing people of things that it didn't have to. It was saying things it didn't have to. Their message was trying to say, don't just tolerate us, but celebrate us, which is another argument that it's very hard to articulate, especially with a controversial subject, without making people really angry, because it's really calling people out and making them angry. That's kind of what the article is for. It's clickbait, especially the title. Don't be offended by the biblical arguments for gay marriage because you're wrong. I don't remember exactly what the article was titled, but you'll definitely see it on the front of Yahoo right now. There's actually several of them, and they're all pretty much the same thing. But you have to, you can't just start the thing in the middle and just say, I'm right, you're wrong. You can't do that. You can't say that at any point, really, unless you have complete and, there are certain arguments you can make that are so indisputable that you can kind of say that, like, don't commit mass genocide, that's wrong. Don't, rape people because that's wrong. But when it comes to the more complex, like, it's not just one and one. It's like it's argued as a cultural thing, or it's argued as a civil rights thing. That's much bigger. That's like, I'm not just killing or hurting one person. I'm trying to change a law that is affecting everybody that's involved within that kind of environment. So you have to address those things in a much more interactive way. You can't just start yelling at things online. It's not gonna mean anything. It'll get you a lot of clicks. It'll get you a lot of views. It'll get you a lot of responses. But that's not really what an argument is for. That's not what you should be trying to get. If that's all you're trying to get, then you're not progressing anything. You're not building anything. You're just throwing up onto anything. And both sides, every side does it. The Republicans do it, the Democrats do it, conservatives, liberals, even the independents do it. Everybody will do something that is to get attention because they have to. It's a game to them. And the winners get political power and money. And it's not really what I want to do. I was thinking about this earlier, and it's so annoying and frustrating to try and have an educated opinion on something and never have the ability to actually explain it properly because you don't have enough time. You don't have enough. You have to have influence to get time to actually try and talk in any larger than one person. I get one view on my videos. And again, I'm not trying to get more views. I'm trying to explain things to people. And it's just frustrating that these people that vomit nothing for hours on end get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views, perpetuating vomit, just negativity and bad logic and bad reasoning and immoral, just fear-mongering and hate-mongering and just hate speech, and they get millions of views, and people are being persuaded by this stuff. They're being changed in some way because it's so moving and it's so emotional and it's so relatable, but it's not anything. That's what makes me feel anxiety and just this feeling of I am not doing enough to help people. I'm not doing enough. I need to do more, and I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm trying to make these videos, and I apologize for the slight tangent, but this is why I'm making these videos, is I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to explain things, and it just doesn't feel like it's doing anything. I hope it is. So I'm going to get back into the thing. Tolerance. where is the argument for and against when something should be tolerated and when something should not be tolerated? The basic stuff I use when I'm trying to start a conversation with somebody in any context, whether I agree or disagree with them, is what they're saying fair? Are they saying something that is fair? Because they can say something I completely agree with, but for the completely different reason than what they're saying. So and so is a really good game, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that is a good game, and then like because I hate the so and so's and it lets me beat them up. No, I don't think that's a fair reason to well, it's not that it's a fair or unfair reason. It's just something that doesn't sound right because it makes you sound kind of like a mass murdering psychopath. And that's when I was having that conversation with a couple of people just the other day. Heroes in video games are generally not sociopaths, but they're self-justified mass murdering kleptomaniacs. That's what it was. They go into people's houses and steal stuff. They kill everything that gets in their way without any remorse. Many times it's people. I'm not talking about war games or anything like that. I'm talking about like games that have you fighting people. There's a lot of them. You can name hundreds and hundreds of them. So I'm not even going to bother. But there's the thing to think about in the narrative of those games is the heroes, especially the silent protagonists. They don't necessarily have a reason for doing this, and sometimes the people they're killing have every reason to try and defend themselves, and you feel completely justified in killing them because they're an enemy. And I always felt that was really interesting. There's a conversation there. But I'm getting off topic again. Sorry. When you have somebody that justifies their actions, you can't just say they're wrong. You can't say they're right either, necessarily. But you have to understand why they're saying these things. So if I were to say, hey, I love this video game because I can kill Nazis or I can kill whatever, it's like, okay, that's your reasoning. I can agree or disagree with that completely. But should somebody that's offended by that, like say somebody's German or somebody's somebody supports the Nazi party, do they have to tolerate you? And I'm using a really weird example, but this is something that's really, really just flat out accepted everywhere. You can kill Nazis in a video game and feel no remorse. That's just how it is because the Nazis did horrible, horrible things. So they are the villain in many, many games. And I apologize for the lighting. So if somebody says, you can't be offended by this because it's accepted. You can't be offended by this because what the group that I am killing now, what they did and what they are doing in the game is unquestionably, justifiably, you can kill them. And I can agree with in a lot of ways, is if they are actively trying to murder you or commit some heinous crimes and all you're trying to do is stop them, sure, that's a great argument. You're saying the game isn't justifying murder, it's justifying a sort of larger scale, I am trying to do something good and these people are trying to do something bad and I am trying to stop them. That's an argument. That is a reason. But when you say, let's turn the trope on its head and say that you're playing as Schindler from Schindler's List. He was technically a Nazi. He was technically making weapons for the Nazis. He was technically a slave owner, pretty much, because the Jewish people that he hired were pretty much forced laborers. Now he turned this completely on its head because he was not. In the context of the movie, and as far as I know in history, because I looked up on it a little bit, he was as close to a saint as you can get in that he risked his own life to save these people, and he sacrificed everything he had to save these people because he felt it was the right thing to do. So it was very, very, very good. Now, that means that it is not your political party's identity, because he did identify as them, even though he did not agree with them at all. And there was several people that did the same thing. Even though he was technically a Nazi, he was not a bad person. So I try to extrapolate on that a little bit and say, okay, just because they're a Nazi doesn't mean you can kill them. There are repentant people that used to be Nazis and no longer were. There's people within the Nazi Party that were dissidents. They were trying to stop what was happening. There were people that just flat out disagreed with orders and tried their best to stop, just on the smaller scale. You can look that up. Good Nazis that were trying to do better things and saved thousands and thousands of people. So that's the opposite of their argument. It's not saying they're wrong. That's not the case, because in their argument, their scenarios that they were justifying, it was completely justified. When something is doing something bad and you are trying to stop them, that is their justification for why it's okay. But in this case, just because you slap a Nazi uniform on somebody and then you have them be shot up without any context, that in itself would be something that I would not necessarily agree with. So if somebody's offended, it's like, hey, just because they're a political, because let's dumb it down a little bit more and say, and I hate dumbing things down, but I'm trying to make it more relevant. And it's hard to justify Nazi. I don't remember the word. Tolerance. Okay, let's just use that word again. Let's make it any other political party. Let's do Democrat and Republican. There, in the article I told you about a minute ago, there were people in the comments saying "Go die, go die." One person said there's a cliff for you to jump off of, and they were pretty much saying the person that wrote this article, if they don't kill themselves, I'll do it. And that's where this kind of argument needs to be made, that just saying you're associated with a certain group, that you are completely justified in murdering them. There are lines that need to be addressed. There are arguments that are not being made, that are extremely important to be made, because these people, they may not actually be truthful in their threats, like, I'm going to find you and cave your head in. That's just the internet. But again, that's not a justification for what they have said. It's harassment, it's dehumanization, it's fear mongering. You're trying to scare them into submission or remission or whatever you want to do. It's wrong. That kind of argument is wrong. It's not fair. It's not articulate in any way. It is the most basic kind of reaction that should not be made. And I believe it is a very similar kind of reaction to, it's just hate. It's the Nazi Party is hated because they did heinous things and they did horrible things. And it's completely fine within our culture to make a game or make a skit or make any kind of medium for humor or for just patriotism of just killing Nazis, and it's completely fine. But then you have these people that they spout the same kind of hate and the same kind of "I would kill you if I have the chance" mentality with other things. There's Democrats do it with Republicans do it with Democrats, atheists do it with not gay people, with religious people do it with atheists. It's everywhere. It's no matter which one you say, somebody from one group will say it about somebody in another group. And I apologize for the slip of the tongue earlier. Everyone associates, for some reason, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people associate atheism with homosexuality or vice versa. And the actual reason why I slipped it up is because the person in the article identified immediately at the top of the article as a Christian and a married gay woman. So they didn't put their foot in their mouth, because that's not necessarily any negative thing at all. But people in the comments immediately attacked that because it was the basis of their article itself, and it was the main proponent of why they were making these arguments is, this is how I identify, and I am not being tolerated. And then it went on to explain why they're not being tolerated and why they should be tolerated. And the comments kind of just, the top ones anyway, were just saying, you're not a Christian, you're an abomination, you are sin, you are lying to yourself, you are lying to God, you're lying. And it was a very, very black and white kind of issue. Is they're saying they're not a Christian because they're gay, which is not so simple. I mean, a lot of people would agree that it was simple because they're simplifying the things that they've read in the Bible. Though let's I'll use an example. The Pope, the current Pope, has said that being a good person and having the spirit of Christ, and this is what he said. I'm not saying this is what I agree with, but he says the spirit of Christ is in your actions and in your motivations and stuff like that, like why you're doing things and what you're doing. It's not just because you identify as Catholic. It's like you are a good Christian if you are a good person. That's pretty much what he was saying. That's not exactly what he's saying. It's not exactly what I agree with. But if somebody like the Pope, who is by definition the leader of the Catholic people, if he can say something like that, if they're a good person, they're a good person. Don't complicate it. Then it's a good start. It's a basic good start of saying, let's have a conversation. Let's not spread hate just because people are slightly different than you. Especially when somebody's trying to do a good thing, whether they're doing it well or not. They're trying to do a good thing, and you just bash on them a lot, and make them feel as bad as you can make them feel, which is not cool. It's not good. There's just so many kinds of examples that you can have. For every situation. Every situation's different. So if the Pope can tolerate people that are not Catholic but who are trying to be a good person, that's a pretty good start, because it's a major jump from a lot of different arguments people have been making in the past. Even the previous Pope said the exact opposite, pretty much. So unless you're a Catholic, you'll never be a good person. He was very, very adamant about, you must be Catholic to be a good person. And this new guy is like, no, you don't really have to be. You have to be trying. And again, he does believe that Catholicism is the way to go, but that doesn't mean that people can't have the qualities without being in that group. So let's go back again to tolerance, just the concept of tolerance and the arguments for and against. I keep jumping out of it, but it's such a broad and complex issue. It's deep. It's broad and deep. When you have something that is really, really complex, like a situation that's really complex, and then everyone around you is simplifying it for the sake of their own idealisms. You say, I identify as this, and I'm a proponent of this, and this is the situation I'm in, and this is why this happened, and then this happened, and then somebody comes in and is like, because of this tiny thing over here, this thing, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters, and that's simplifying it, and it happens everywhere. You have complex issues that are political or religious based. Sometimes it's ethic based, moral based, and you have these people that they know nothing about the situation at all. They don't care about the situation. They're just proponents of their own thing. So they grab this one aspect of it, and then they're like, this is the reason it happened, or this is the reason that it's important or not important, or this is the reason why you should die. And I'll give an example that the shooting that happened. It was a terrible, terrible tragedy. 9 people were killed in a church. The guy, blatantly racist guy, as far as I can tell. He had the thing on his chest that was for a hate group, a specific hate group that hated African American people. And he went into a church and shot up a whole bunch of black people. That is kind of cut and dry as to the way, as far as I can tell, why he did it, unapologetically did it. And then there's people that are trying to use that as a gun control thing, or an anti-gun control thing, or that the Confederate flag should be removed because it's a proponent of hate. And those are not necessarily wrong arguments, though. When you take a tragedy and you try to make it into a political, tool. You have to understand that you cannot just do that without a care, just on a whim. Like, oh, this is another notch in my belt. You have to see it as what it is. You can't just start, fear mongering and hating people. It's like, what that guy did was because of intolerance, at its base. I don't know if he was mentally ill. I don't know what was any of that. But he did do it because somebody put in his head, whether it was himself, family, whatever the hate group he was in, put it into his head that these people deserved to die, and he did it. So we should not tolerate that. We should not tolerate this hate. His actions were wrong. So there's a sort of, it's really, really hard to word it right. There are different levels and situations that warrant a discussion of that magnitude, where the entire country gets involved. Where did this come from, and how do we fix it? People seem to believe it was the Confederate flag, and it was just the natural hate towards African American people that still perpetuates today. And that's a very valid argument. There is a lot of hate in the world still against African Americans or minorities in general, and even against majorities as well. There's going to be hate because people look different or from different places, and that needs to be addressed. There needs to be a cultural shift in that regard, and I've said that for a long time. Is that when you justify behavior based off of simplification, justification bias, you are wrong. Your actions might not be that bad, but your justifications are bad. So, and even if it's in a positive light, it's like, oh, the Japanese are really good at mathematics, I should hire them in my business. It's still kind of racist, even though it like makes them get jobs easier in that area. So it's this cultural idea that you can base your actions off of preconceived ideas that are not based in reality is wrong. So again, I've gotten off of the topic again. Tolerance. I'm not going to title this tolerance. I need to title it something else. I've gotten off topic so many times, but where is the argument coming from? Like, if you have a scenario that's too complex to explain in a short amount of time, but you're trying to articulate it in a way that doesn't take up everybody's time, because then no one will listen to you. If you don't, it's like, oh, 5 pages? Why did you write this? I'm not reading it. TLDR. That is really what I get a lot. When I don't write short things. Like, sometimes when I'm responding to a lot of people, I'll make it a paragraph, or I'll connect a whole bunch of arguments into one. Like, I'll respond to this person on this line and this person on this line. But I hope that they read everything, because it's all parts of the same thing. It's just this is their exact reaction, like my reaction to them, and then the rest of it's bigger. I really hope they read that, but most of the time they don't. I've had somebody ask me a question, like a legitimate question. It's like, what is this? And I sent them probably a solid page of text in responses, like solid page of text. And then they're like, why'd you write such a long thing? I just wanted you to give me a simple answer. Like, there isn't a simple answer to this question. You asked me for the answer, and you don't want it. You want a sound bit that doesn't answer anything. It just makes it contents you. It makes you content with this pseudo knowledge. This idea that you have knowledge when you don't. And that bothers me, because I'm trying to explain something, and even the people that want to know the answer don't want to know the answer. It's probably why videos are easier to digest, because you don't have to read it, and a lot of people for some reason don't like to read, which is fine. They'll just listen, or they'll put it on in the background when they're doing something else, and it's like they're sort of absorbing the knowledge, but maybe not necessarily, because they're doing something else. But at least they're trying, and that's cool. But there's just I don't know how to articulate things as well as I should. I'm trying. I'm learning, I guess, by practicing, by making these videos, and that's another reason I'm making these videos, is so I can figure out how to articulate myself right. Because when I first started these things, if you go back to the beginning, I was terrible. I was like stuttering and confused about myself. I mean, I'm still messing up. I'm jumped onto 5 different subjects in this video alone, but I think that's one of the things that I have to do when I'm explaining something, because that's where my thought processes go. That's where my reasonings go. They branch out. It's not one line. It's like a tree, and the tree, all of it put together makes it work. If it's just one stick, it won't do anything. It's not strong. It's not complex. It's just the simplified stuff, and I don't like that. Each branch is a reason, and they all come together to make the whole. So that's why I always have so much trouble staying really, really focused, because it's not something you can be. At least I can't. It's just the way my mind works. So hopefully it doesn't bother people. But tolerance. Okay. The whole premise of this video was to explain this, and I'm failing so badly. So I'm gonna try doing it. I'm gonna make another video right after this one, and it's gonna be part 2, and it's going to be me actually writing stuff down and then making the video. So I'm going to end this video now, and I'm going to start another one right afterwards when I write down how I'm going to word this properly, because I'm getting way off topic. So I will see you there, and peace.